Mount Everest, Chomolungma, the roof of the world, the third pole, the highest mountain in the world, goes by many names. Until little more than half a century ago, Everest remained unconquered. These days, climbers come in their hundreds every year to measure themselves against the greatest mountaineering challenge there is. And for those foolish enough to think that these days the dangers are any less, there's a stark reminder of how Mount Everest can punish those who fail to respect her.
The spring of 2006 was a dark time for mountaineers attempting to scale the highest mountain in the world. 8 of them lost their lives, including 5 who were killed in the week from May the 15th to the 22nd. With foothills in the south of Dingru County, Tibet Autonomous Region, Mount Everest stands in the middle of the Himalayas, which range across the border between China and Nepal. The Tibetan name for Mount Everest, Chomolungma, means goddess. Among the local Tibetans, there is the belief that the disasters suffered by the mountaineers were punishment for some form of insult they had committed against the goddess.
登山运动呢，它本身大家都知道是一项勇敢者的运动，但是呢，它充满了很多的挑战，不可预测的、不可抗拒的因素非常多。
For the professional mountain climbers braving the dangers of the roof of the world, there's nowhere more important on their arduous journey than base camp. To ordinary visitors, even reaching base camp at 5,150 meters is a considerable challenge, one that requires local mountaineers to act as guides and assistants. In the past few years, increasing numbers of people have attempted to climb Everest, helped by professional mountain guides. The so-called third pole, it seems, is no longer the forbidden zone it once was. In a single week in the spring of 2006, over 100 people reached the top of Everest. 27 on May the 14th and May 15th, 42 on May the 18th, and 28 on May the 20th. What had once been a no-man's land on the summit became somewhat crowded. Apart from Everest, Tibet has 5 other mountains above 8,000 meters. 50 more are over 7,000 meters, and countless others around 6,000 meters. The Tibetan highland is still chilly even in the middle of summer. Base camp is largely deserted in July, since most of the mountaineering teams left at the beginning of June after the best climbing season of April and May. On May the 29th, 1953, New Zealander Edmund Hillary and Nepalese Sherpa Tenzing Norgay became the first humans to reach the summit of Mount Everest. "22 years later, China organized a team of 400 mountaineers to conquer Everest, 36 of whom were women. No woman had ever reached the summit before. Luo Ze was the leader of that pioneering women's team.
女队员登顶能不成功，确实，不管是从领导也好，是下面的教练、队员，都心里没有底了。
At the end of an arduous day's climbing, the team reached Lhasa. The area is famous as the home of Duiqie, a traditional Tibetan ethnic dance. Almost everyone in Lhasa, old and young alike, is a skillful Duiqie dancer. The following morning, Nima Tsiren points excitedly to a snow-capped peak in the distance, saying, "This is Mount Everest itself."
这个位置呢，就看珠穆朗玛峰是最佳的一个位置。但在这个季节啊，我们能看到珠穆朗玛峰是很难得的。一般这个季节都是云雾缭绕，都很难得见到珠穆朗玛峰的。
也就是说，我们今天运气非常好。这里估计目测离珠峰大概直线距离大概多少？
直线距离应该100公里吧。
That 100-kilometer journey takes a whole day to complete. The journey gets harder the nearer you get to Mount Everest. The Jiaoula Pass at over 5,000 meters and a section of winding mountain road known locally as the 99 Turns lead eventually to Rongbu Monastery, the highest monastery in the world. It's just 25 kilometers away from Mount Everest. Here, the perennially snow-covered roof of the road reveals her true sanctity and beauty. Luoze explains that Rongbu Monastery was the site of the base camp for the Chinese National Mountaineering Team in 1975.
绒布是在这里，绒布是当时的这个车是这样的，你看，当时有多少个车了？50多辆车，那时候，你看大的人嘛。
当时这里一片都是空地啊。
对，都空地，就是前面就是你看这个地方有一些个这个破房子吧，就是其实上我们搭的帐篷都是这个地方。
On that historic expedition of 1975, 9 Chinese mountaineers, including Luoze and a woman called Pan Do, reached the summit of Everest. During that expedition, the Chinese team measured the height of Mount Everest. Their calculation of 8,848.13 meters above sea level became the officially recognized height internationally. The current base camp is 8 kilometers nearer to the foot of Mount Everest than it used in 1975 by the Chinese team. The dozens of tents mark the base camp, the point where the sightseers end their trip. There are restaurants and inns. A mobile phone signal is available, but not electricity. In what is the off-season for climbing, the tents are largely deserted. But in the high season, the base camp will be like a holiday camp, where crowds of explorers and mountaineers from all over the world get together.
有些探险这个旅游的到大本营一看，哎，珠穆朗玛峰，看到好像哎，我这个3天就上去了嘛。其实它这个攀登是需要很长的一个周期啊。比如说你到了珠穆朗玛峰以后，首先你要在珠峰大本营适应，这个海拔位高度是5150，这个地方呢你需要适应1周左右，然后你会上到这个6500前进营地，前进营地适应完了，你还得要上到这个1号营地7028，然后2号营地的7790。3号营地的那个8300，对吧？上一个高度下来，再上到更高的一个高度，再回来休息，调整过来以后再上去，才能够就是说正式的突击。最长的，我的印象当中有3个月攀登的这个历史，这个短一点的也需要1个半月的时间进行准备适应。
The lack of oxygen at base camp means most people spend some time suffering from altitude sickness. Lozo explains that back in 1975, China was economically so weak that a team had to ascend Mount Everest without any oxygen supply equipment.
像比如说8000米以上的话，应该是含氧量20%到30%。像珠峰顶上的话，那就是含氧量20%了。像在拉萨海拔3670的这个地方的话，含氧量应该是在陆地的60%。
Nima Ziren and Lozo's faces turn solemn as they explain they must visit some old friends. Moving on towards Mount Everest, the road seems to disappear almost as soon as base camp is left behind. After a bumpy ride along the riverbed, the vehicles reach a hill slope facing Mount Everest. On the slope, there is a cemetery with dozens of tombstones. The two mountaineers say the names inscribed on the tombstones belong to mountaineers from all over the world who lost their lives in the attempt to ascend Mount Everest. The graves are in fact symbolic. They lie empty because the bodies have been buried forever in the deep snow of the mountain. Nima Ziren stands in front of a tomb with the name Yan Genghua inscribed. Yan from Heilongjiang province was his close friend. He was the first Chinese amateur mountaineer to conquer the roof of the world.
当时的那种天气呢是非常的恶劣，整个暴风雪，然后所有的在8300的队伍啊，外国队伍都在下撤。我们在大本营的所有的中方人员都在劝他下来，说让他下来，但是他呢，就是说珠峰的吸引力太大了，但是他没有放弃，就最终他把这个报话机给关掉了，完了以后之后就再也没有联系了，跟他没联系上。
There are many such stories to be told here of comrades and friends who gave their lives in the attempt to conquer Mount Everest. Even the most seasoned mountaineer finds it hard to hold back the tears.
每年来珠峰探险的遇难的人很多，主要的我感觉到就是说，他们呢有很多人，他们是有那种冒险精神，因为登山呢，我从我的认识当中应该是，对吧？是探险，而不是冒险。现在的很多人呢，就是缺少很多经验，这个常识啊，登山的这个知识也掌握的少，然后到了这里以后，有些是装备不足，有些是经验不足，有些是没有保障。
The solemn tombstones with sacred Mount Everest behind create mixed emotions: sadness, awe, and admiration.